You're listening to the Fooled by the Root podcast.
Hello, everyone. This is your host, Heidi Marble. I am beyond excited to be here today with beautiful Elle Clausen, our guest, and Amy Hansen, our co-host. So before I have these beautiful ladies introduce themselves, on Elle's last interview, which was episode 70, we discussed at the interview that we both wear black a lot. And Amy, I don't know if that's true for you too, but we figured out that it was because we wanted to go under the radar. So our commitment was during our next interview, we would wear red. And it's so funny if you could see all of us because we all have black and then we have something red. It's like we still have to have our black. So anyway, we at least honored part of the commitment to maybe the next one will be fully red. So I'd love to introduce Amy. Amy has been fantastic to step in as I navigate some health challenges, just to be here with me, to keep things going, to add another voice to the podcast. And I'm just so grateful that you're here, Amy. Can you just briefly introduce yourself to everyone?
Sure. I'm Amy, and I am an adoptee. I've always known I was adopted. Grew up in a loving home, and as you know, my journey continued and I reached 50, I came out of the fog and struggle on this journey, and I just want to help have our voices heard. And so what you're doing and allowing me to participate, I am honored.
Thank you, Amy. And Elle, you are so special to me and so dear, and I'm going to get emotional because you and I have been messaging back and forth for a long time. And your messages are always so beautifully timed. There's so much there, and I can't wait to talk to you about all of this. But I would like to remind people that have listened to your episode, and also maybe people that haven't heard it yet, if you could just briefly tell us a little bit about you, and then we'll dive into some questions.
Okay. Thank you. You're going to make me cry before it starts. Our texts and our talks have been so nice. Thank you. Well, I was adopted in 1970 as an infant. I'm Canadian. I always knew I was adopted. Things were, on the surface, on paper, it looked good, but home was pretty tense. And I always thought it was I thought it was the religion, not the adoption. Turns out it was more the adoption enhanced by the religion, and when I was about 48, did a search and found First Family, and things just sort of exploded. I always describe it as, instead of layers of an onion coming off, it was like my onion chopped in half and didn't quite know what to do with all of it. I am estranged from my adopting family, but I'm in relationship with both sides of my biological family, which has been really nice and complicated and nice. It's all of it. And we've chatted a lot about talking again, and here we are.
Here we are, Elle, and you sent me, you are an incredible artist, first and foremost. You're an athlete, but you are an eloquent writer. And what you wrote to me, it's just so beautiful. So I'm going to share this. When was the last time you felt fully yourself? He asked. When I was about 7, I replied, making dioramas out of shoe boxes, creating worlds that I could fit in, that would fit me, if only I could shrink enough. I wish I could go back to before I knew I didn't have a self, before my heart became inflamed with the desire for a self, before I bit into the forbidden for my own good, before the juice of knowing began to run in painful sweetness down my chin, my hands, my forearms, making me sticky with longing, unable to help looking back over my shoulder to what might have been, flirting with dangerous longing, grieving the loss of the place that should have been mine. I expect someday I will likely find myself to be a pillar of salt. What would be left if I began peeling off the layers of all the things I liked for others, agreed to do for others, and gone along with for others? If I unwrapped the bandages and stopped being the invisible woman.
You know, sometimes when people say, I wish I was in your head for a minute, I'm like, no, no, you don't.
Well, I can definitely relate to everything that you said. And I think your words really put context around feelings that are sometimes hard to describe. So, Elle, you did it. Well, just to get me to stop crying for a moment, let's talk about the fairy forest, shall we?
No. Right. Yeah. So good.
So it's been a bumpy season, and Elle has been messaging me, and she sent me these images. She lives in this gorgeous winter wonderland. And she said, Heidi, I want to do something special for you. Do you want to go to the fairy forest? And I'm thinking, well, hell yes. I don't know how I'm going to get there. But she sent me these incredible pictures and also a video that the sound of a beautiful little creek running through the snow. And I was so like in your world during that experience of looking at those pictures. And can you tell me a little bit more about this forest and what it means to you and how you connect with nature as part of your healing journey? Because I know that is a big deal for you.
Mm-hmm. It's funny because I have a real half and half. Like I love the city. And being out here where we are, I miss the city. I miss bustle. I miss all of that. And yet I do love it here. It's not like I don't want to be here. So there's always this push-pull for me. But we live, our town is small, and it's about 7,000 people, including all of the surrounding acreages and everything like that. And I am quite literally like a 2-minute walk from a trailhead that leads into nowhere. It's trails. And there are several places in town that you can access these trails from, but you could, if you just keep walking, you would just be nowhere. But underneath one of the ridges where one of the trailheads is, it's right below the elementary school. And I don't know who started it when. It was after my kids were done at that elementary school. They started going down with these little craft projects, and they found this little spot where there's a bit of a glade. It's just more free of scrubby brush and things like that. And so the kids started making a fairy forest. There's a sign that says the Lois Creek Fairy Forest, and they put up little houses and strings of beads and acorns hanging on strings and things like that. And I just find it so, I love the creativity of the kids. I love the imagination. I just think it's such a precious little spot. And it's always fun to walk by and see what new thing they've hung up. Like sometimes there'll be a new set of wind chimes or something, It's just really lovely. And so usually on a longer walk, I hit that spot coming home because it's only about 10 minutes from home. And I go in there and see what they've been doing and if there's anything new. And sometimes there's just a bunch of little footprints.
Yeah. Well,
footprints.
I just loved it. And I can imagine, if you're having a hard day, to be able to go out there and be caught up in something so magical made by beautiful, innocent kids. It was just really special. Thank you again for sharing that with me, Elle.
Welcome.
And as I was scouring through our messages, one thing that popped out big time is how you redefined fog. Fear, obligation, and guilt. Yeah. Can you talk to us a little more about that?
Well, I didn't make that up. I can't remember who I was listening to who brought that up. And it just reminded me that it's an acronym. I think there are a lot of times people in our community of adopted people some people don't like the term fog because they don't like the idea of having lived sort of in a misty reality, unaware all their lives, until coming out of the fog or whatever. And that makes sense to me. It doesn't feel good to feel like you've been walking around like a zombie,
No.
I understand not liking it. And yet when I was reminded that it's that acronym for fear, obligation, and guilt, and when we step out of that, or when we start to try to step out of that, that's a lot of work. It's why we're so tired all the time. It's why, should I speak for everybody? I have not yet heard one interview of one adopted person or read one memoir where they weren't exhausted. So maybe somebody isn't tired. I haven't met them yet or read them yet. So, and just the fear of being ourselves, the fear of asking questions, because we're supposed to be grateful. That's the obligation. We were saved from what terrible situations we may have come from. And again, the more stories I listen to, the more of us, it seems, come from very average backgrounds. We weren't being saved from horrible, horrible things. Some were, for sure, but many of us were simply unexpected to single people who didn't have support, right? Especially what I can speak to is the baby scoop era.
Yeah.
So you have patriarchy, you have eugenics, you have all of those adverse things staring young women in the face. They're not allowed to be a mother. Somebody else deserves to be a mother more than they do because they got themselves pregnant, right? So there's the obligation. And then the guilt of feeling like I'm not grateful, or I want to look, or the guilt of being who I am instead of being what was expected or what was hoped for as a blank slate. And I just realized too, like, I'm not sure I came out of the fog. That's also part of the thing, so much as I could see the fog I was in.
Wow. Yeah, I think, Amy, I'm sure we can all relate to this. It is such a difficult journey when you see reality so clearly. And we were talking before we were recording, I think you said Haley Radke, or one of her guests said, you can't unsee something you've seen.
Right.
And you can't turn back, and there's all that to cope with. It's really, really difficult. And I know, Amy, you've been recently out of the fog. I've only been out for maybe 3 years too. So it's fair.
Yeah. I mean, it's like you said, it's exhausting, and it's just so much in your head, right? You're thinking one way, and how is that thought going to affect someone else? And do you have to say something in a different way because you might hurt them, or you might make them upset? It's a constant struggle with inside that people don't see. Something recently I just thought about too is I was looking at old pictures, like, when my kids were younger, and I saw this smile on my face, and I thought, oh, if I could go back, like, that smile to me of being a mom of young kids was so innocent, because I hadn't gone through this yet. And I just thought, will I get that smile back? Because we're still just going through this constantly, and it is exhausting.
Oh, that's just heartbreaking. Will I get that smile back?
I know.
I mean, I'm happy. We're all, I feel like we make it work, right? But before you came out of the fog and before you realized it, like, if you look back and you see that, I know I was a different person. Like, just.
Yeah.
No question. Can definitely relate to that. And thinking about, I wrote down mothering, because my son he's getting ready to go off to medical school. Thank God he turned out in spite of us. And his beautiful bride, they're going to have a new baby, and they're leaving. And they live in an apartment on our property. And it feels like I'm being abandoned all over again.
Oh, wow.
And I wonder, because you have raised up children, how do you think adoption has affected motherhood? I'd be interested to hear from both of you on this one, because I think we should talk about that. Sometimes, at least for me, I get really one-minded that this is just affecting me, but it's not. It's affected my parenting and my marriage and my friendships and every single thing. So I just love if we could explore mothering a little bit and how that's worked out for you ladies.
Sure.
Oh.
Amy?
Yes, go Elle.
Okay.
Wisdom. I don't think the fairy forest is going to fix this one, but let's try.
Damn.
Yeah.
Oh, it's funny you brought that up, because I was just thinking about that today. I think partly because I was, in getting ready for our conversation, flipping through my notebooks, looking at things I'd written, looking back at what I had written to you. And some of the notes I made, even just listening to other episodes of other shows, yours and others like it. And sometimes I've run into other guests, women, let's say, who are moms, who talked about hovering and being helicoptery and all that sort of stuff. And I always, my throat got a little thick there for a second, because I feel like I was more aloof. I feel like, I was available. I'm trying to think of how to explain it, but I tend to be in the moment. And so even with the kids having moved out, say, I don't contact them as much. I think about them constantly, but it's like, unless it's in front of my face, I tend to just float along in my own little interior world as an individual who's alone. Like and I feel bad. I wonder sometimes if they wanted more hovering, if they would like, I don't know. I would have to ask them, but I'm kind of scared to now.
I hear
this is 26 and the twins are 23. And I wonder I wonder how they would describe me. And I'm not sure I want to know. Like, you all could know, you could interview them and you all could know. And I'll just live in the fairy forest.
That's perfect, Elle. I think it's real. For me, I was so afraid for my son to feel abandoned that was where my hovering was coming from. It was fear-based. And I understand the protection, that thing that you can't really describe. It's really, really interesting. Amy, what about your experience of mothering?
I would say when they were younger, I hovered, more so. As they grew up and, leaving the house, I feel like I connect more with Elle on this, is that when my son left, I was very proud of him to leave.
Yes.
I wanted, you want them to come home, but I never wanted to put pressure on them to come home for certain things. They were always invited. The house is always welcoming, but I never wanted to be the one that said, you have to come home and see me. Because I felt like I got that from my adopted parents, the pressure, the guilt of having to go to holidays and see certain people. And I never wanted to put that pressure on my kids. So in a way, I feel like I let them go and build their life and check in, but maybe not as regularly as, I should. But again, I think about them often, all the time. We'll, send pictures or chats and texts, but it's not that phone call that, and as like a mom, I love when they call me, but I don't want to step into their space and make them feel like I'm hovering, I guess.
Yeah.
No,
yeah.
That's really good to know. Thank you both for sharing that, because I think about it all the time, especially because our kids are all adults now. So what do you do at this point is the question. We can't go back. And I know, I'm sure you guys feel the same way, that sometimes just having a parent acknowledge something is really just such a huge step. And speaking of that, Elle, I've been thinking about the estrangement with your adoptive family that you spoke about in your first episode,
Mhm.
and how painful, and I don't want to say freeing, I'm lacking terminology. Are
Sure.
you comfortable talking about what is kind of the latest for you in that realm, and how are you
Sure.
feeling, and are you still estranged, or is there connection? Are you more settled with it?
Mm. I am settled with it. When we first talked, and I think I referenced another interview I had heard where someone was estranged and had said, "No, I don't miss them." And I had listened to that and thought, holy,
Yeah.
somebody said that out loud, A, and B, I feel like that, and it's okay, right? To let something go, especially if it's unhealthy. I didn't re-listen to, I should have listened to our interview again so I knew what I'd actually said. So I don't know if I said this, but I suffered from chronic pain and things
Yeah.
like that. And it was gone. Like it was
Yeah.
gone within the week of
And
having
that's
those boundaries.
amazing to me, because it lives
Mhm.
so tightly in your body that when you made that decision, there was that release. And
Yeah. Yeah. So that I don't regret. I think it's too bad that it has to be like this. And yet it does. So there's that. Our kids have always known that they are welcome to pursue a relationship with their grandma and grandpa as however they would like, just in spite of my needing my own distance. And they know why, because that was a grandma and grandpa they grew up with. And so that's fine. Like, no hard feelings. Like, you do you, everybody do you. And they have all sort of done that. Two of them, well, our oldest is estranged from them as well, because here goes back to the religious part. They're so very legalistic
Mm.
and hard. I had to admit a little while ago, talking to my psychiatrist, I had to actually admit out loud that in the realm where I grew up, it's a little culty. It's very high control. And there's a lot of religious trauma that I have as well to add to this rat's nest. Our oldest son is gay and they can't deal. So he's had to have boundaries. Our daughter just feels like she can't relate. I don't want to tell their stories. It's their stories, but she doesn't really keep in much contact because she just doesn't feel, it's not safe. She doesn't feel comfortable. Her twin has moved out there, and in order to look for a place to live, and they said he could live there, and he has been, and finding housing out there has become absolutely brutal, like absolutely brutal. And so he's been with them much longer, and he's starting to get the brunt of their dysfunction. Let's put it that way. And so this Christmas, there was an attempt on their part to contact me, and just like with a Christmas present, thinking, well, your son is here, so now it's all good. I guess, I don't know. I opened up the front door, saw the parcel left there, and I just shut the door. And within half an hour, my back was starting to hurt. Also because he's still there, he's in it. And sometimes he'll call me and tell me of their conversations. And it breaks my heart that he's having to parry that, duck and weave. There was one conversation we had together where he said, "Mom, how often did they do this with you?" I was like, "Oh, when I was 12, the conversation started and the preaching, whatever. And 2-3 times a week, every week till I moved out." And he just went, "I can't, like, that is just shocking." he can't wait to get out. There's just nowhere to go at the moment.
Oh, well, that has to be so hard for you as a mom.
So as far as being estranged, for me, I feel good. I feel fine. I feel, like I said, it's unfortunate, but watching my kids, I don't know, I guess in my head, and I don't know what Amy thinks about this, but when we become grandparents, maybe we will become grandparents, I just want to bake cookies and say, oh, I'm sorry, honey, that's so hard. Here, come, let's watch a movie. Like, you know, like, be a grandma. You don't have to teach and preach and correct and make sure they overhear your prayer time saying, you know, we pray for such and such because they've been led away by Satan. Like, that was actually something he walked in on. And so that part's been hard because I feel like I'm not separated from them anymore. Like I had been, like I need to be. I'm just waiting for him to be out. So that's where that is.
That's so painful, Elle, and it takes me back to what we read that you wrote. Not being able to be fully who you are. You know, one thing that we did not get to talk about last time that I think would be so lovely to discuss. We talked a little bit about your first mom, but we never talked about what it was like to meet her, or we never really dove into that whole situation. So can you tell us more about your first family and what has that done for your soul to be connected to them? Because I know you said you have a relationship with some.
Yeah. You know, so the first person I met was my younger sister. So I have on my paternal side an older brother. On my maternal side, I have one younger sister. Of course, she has a different father. And so she's been a little disappointed when she'll show people, like, I have a big sister, look, and she'll show pictures and they're like, I don't really see the likeness. I'm thinking, yeah, but they can't see us together. Right. And they can't hear our voices together. And they can't, because she was the first one I met and she came here and my husband said, oh my God, there's two of you. You know, in the dry, sarcastic sense of humor. And she came armed with stories and family photos. And it's a very Russian background. Long story short, they were of a wealthy set. Then the revolution started, so they fled to China, where a lot of white Russians went, which I didn't know. And then, of course, revolution started there and they had to leave. So my mother was actually born in Shanghai during the revolution.
Wow.
And then they moved to Brazil, and there was social unrest in South America, of course. And my grandfather just wanted to be able to hide in a nice middle class place, and no one would take them because he was Russian and Chinese, like, except that they weren't Chinese. Well, and not that that even matters. They're just clearly trying to get out. But this is in the height of the Cold War and the Red Scare. And so are they spies, blah, blah. So he got into Canada because he actually bumped into the Canadian ambassador, unbeknownst to him, who asked him some questions and got him into the country under the guise of being French Canadian, because the last name was French and he could speak French and all this sort of stuff. So that's how they ended up here, which I didn't know. Like, that was such a wild story. But my sister came with all sorts of stories to tell, and family photos, and sort of the fanciness of our shared grandmother, who, you know, I was making stew one day, chopping up root vegetables, and she looked at, she's like, that's not Irina approved. Like, root vegetables are for peasants. I was like, and he was like, oh my God, you make so much sense now. I guess I'm a little bit of a princess. I don't know. So meeting my mom for the first time then, I flew out there and she met me at the airport and she was waiting, you know, how you come down the hall and the doors open and there's a bunch of people. She's like, I saw you and I thought that one's mine.
Oh.
Because she could recognize my face.
Oh.
And also my, what would you call it? My walk, my carriage or whatever. I got to meet my uncle, her younger brother, who was living with her at the time. And he said too, he looked and the last name was Marie. And he said, such a Marie, like so Marie. Although what he was really referring to was their mother, whose last name was Kazamirov, you know, whatever. It was just so, in many ways, easy to be with them. The first time I met my mom, and she was driving, and she, you know, picked me up from the airport, and we were driving, and because we're both nervous, and we talked on the phone and everything, but she just about took the wrong turn. And okay, you can bleep this out of your podcast if you need to, but she just about took the wrong turn, and she was like, oh, fuckity fuck. And I burst out laughing because that was not allowed in the family I grew up in. Like, you don't use foul language of any sort or anything. And just the fact that just blurted out from her in frustration at that moment, I just thought, oh, it just felt casual and it felt relaxed. Even in the nervousness, there was like, okay, I don't have to watch my language. I don't have to be careful about those things that I've always had to be careful about. Now, there were things I was careful about. I didn't want to push her too hard on information. I didn't want to make her feel guilty for having felt she needed to relinquish me. I didn't want her to feel bad about who I grew up with, you know, because that was out of her control. She was told that I would be placed with an appropriate family, and she gave a lot of information that a lot of people our age don't have. Like, there was things about art and architecture and photography and ballet and all these sorts of things. And yet I was just handed over to this very conservative church family who would never put me in dance or never, you know, all of those different things. She had no control. So I was careful about some of the things because I didn't want her to feel bad. I didn't want to bear her off, you know?
Yeah, I think a lot of us relate to that, Elle. And I think, you know, back to what you were saying too in one of our text messages, and this just stuck out to me, is that it always felt like everyone else was more important than you, like your feelings. And even in these situations,
yeah,
it's like that part of us that wants to make sure everybody else is okay as we're starving for information and feeling nervous to get what it's just difficult emotionally to cope with these things, even if they're going well.
It is, because you are holding a bit back because you don't want, it's like we're looking at them like a little wild animal, right? And you're trying to get them to come close, but if you move too fast, they're going to bolt, right? Maybe that door slams shut on us, and then where are we? We didn't even get to see the ancestral photos maybe that we would have liked to have seen. And so I think we are often really careful about that. Now, fast forward, I'd seen her a couple of times. She did come here to visit. We do get along very well. She loves to laugh. When I get her laughing, she often will tell me her face hurts. So that's fun. At one point during the pandemic, I did get to go there, and she'd had a fall and had hurt herself, so she needed to lie down a lot. So I would go and lie down in bed with her, and we would just chat. And at one point, she reached over and she started stroking my hair. And she said, "We haven't done this since you were 4 days old."
Oh, hell.
That was pretty special.
Just what a powerful thing. Like, I just think about that. how extraordinary. I just want that for everyone, like to be able to lay next to their mother and have that healing. That's just, I'm so happy that you both got to experience. It's such a simple thing, but it's not.
And I get it, because so many people don't even get an answer, right? Because mom can't go there. She can't open up that wound that she was told to shut down and get over, get over it. You'll have other babies, I'm well aware that that does not happen for nearly anyone or everyone. I mean, and it was kind of a big deal. I might have cried a little bit.
Well, if you didn't cry, I'd be concerned, because that's a big one. Well, as we're rounding the corner on our interview, one of the things that I love so much about you is how open you are and how in touch you are with your feelings and how brave you are. You inspire me, and you are not shy about talking about the grief. And I think it would be really good for us to talk about that, because I think collectively, as a group of adopted people in community, and the people that are connected to us, be they, adopted parents or our first families, there's just enough grief to go around. But for the adopted person's heart, I don't know, we're all about the same age. So for me, it's almost becoming more intense as I age. I think I'm processing through a lot, but there's all of my parents are gone. And so there's nowhere to really put it all. And I just wonder how maybe both of you, where are you at in your grieving process, and what space do you give for it? Is it creativity? Is it crying? Like, I looked at some of your beautiful images, Elle, and they're very thought-provoking. For me, I'm like that wild animal, except I'm the one in the headlights. I'm like, the feelings are so much that you just like you can't even move. I don't know if that makes any sense.
I agree with you. I think in some ways it gets more intense. It attaches itself to that idea of once you've seen it, you can't unsee it again, right? And so that pebble you throw in and all the rings that keep circling out and out and out, and you just realize how much there is to grieve. And I think sometimes, though, part of that grieving is that even the people that I'm close to, I want to say this right now, not Tony. So he's super, like, really supportive. And I have another really close friend who is also very supportive. But even some of the closest friends are kind of the like, when are you going to get over it sort of thing. And not necessarily in those words, but we all know that. We've all heard that, right? Like, you had a nice family. I'm like, well, actually, no, I didn't. On paper, it was great. And many adoptees have very understanding adopting parents, and mine weren't. So that's a fact. And so sometimes the grieving, I feel, is hard because people don't even want to let you. Like, how do I get over it if you won't see it for what it is when I say it out loud?
There. Yep.
And so even things like, I've been reading the book, The Myth of Normal by Gabor Mate. And
so good.
Oh man.
Trigger,
and talking
trigger though.
Right? Like, hallelujah. But he and his son wrote it together, but he talks about bonding and what happens to infants and all this sort of stuff. And people are so into that until it's an adopted person. Like, they'll grieve that their child had to be in an incubator for a while, and they're wondering about the attachment and worried about the child. But the moment you say, well, yeah, I'm just sitting there smiling, listening, going, yeah, I get it. But the moment that comes up, oh no, but it doesn't count. And so often that grieving to me is attached to this, like, but not for you. You should be grateful you weren't aborted, but not for you. And I just think, you want me to get over it, but you don't want me to actually name it. Well, it's not going to happen then. And I'm not sure you can get over it. That's where it is. I write a lot. I doodle a lot. I have this tendency to, I'm an all or nothing person. And so if I get frustrated with something, I start chucking, you know? And I had set up one of the rooms that the kids had moved out of into an art studio. And in about September, I did a painting. Well, I mean, I've done a few paintings. I did one big painting, and I don't know what it was about it. It just made me feel nauseous. A few people saw it and really liked it. And I couldn't stand that it was there. So I painted over it, and I took down the studio, and I only started sketching again like 3 days ago. I haven't painted or sketched since September.
Oh, that's what, wow. That's intense.
I just couldn't. And so I took it down and made it back into a bedroom, because it made me feel physically ill to create.
Yeah, I get that. I get that, because it's almost like you're looking at it so viscerally and it's outside of your,
Yeah.
and that's scary and overwhelming. I hear you, because like you look at something you've written or something and it's a manifestation of the pain inside. I mean, that's my impression when you told me what you did. Wow, Elle, I'm so glad that you're back at it though, because your imagery and your writing moved me deeply. Amy, what about your grieving process? Where are you on the spectrum of all of this?
Yeah, I think I'm just all over the place. I'm all over the place. You know, I think as I'm trying to do more self-care, put myself first, but of course that's a hard thing to do, right? Because we feel like we don't deserve to do that. You know, my kids are older, but you know, I'm always at their beck and call, even if it's, you know, takes me away from something I was planning to do. I am trying to journal, and I do some drawing. But you know, I haven't, it comes in waves, you know, sometimes it's very, like you could spend a day and it's great. And other times it's like, it's just not going to happen today. But yeah, I don't think we're ever going to get past our grief. Especially like you said, Elle, if it can't be acknowledged by people who are close to you. Like I do too. I have some good family and friends that are right beside me and can understand and can empathize. But then I do have close friends and family that just don't get it and say, well, when are you going to be over it? When are you going to get better? Oh, you still see a therapist? When are you going to get fixed? It's like, this is a journey of a lifetime, right? I've just realized this, and I was living with it for 48 years before I realized what kind of grief and sadness it had put in my body. So it's going to take a while.
Well, I appreciate both of you sharing that. And as we begin to end the interview, one of the things that I loved, Elle, about our last interview is when I asked you to give hope to the audience. And you had something prepared that was so beautiful, and I wish I had a better memory. But I was looking up alternative words for hope before this interview. And I wonder what you think of the word belief. And the reason that resonated with me is because I want to believe that things can get better. I want to believe that this suffering, that we can find some kind of peace. And for those of us that are older, pedal to the metal, like more years behind me than in front of me at this point. And I don't know about you, but that is when I go on my prayer walk or my calling out to the universe walk every morning. I'm just like, I just want to know what it feels like to feel peace. You know, I don't know about you, but I'm desperate for it. So how do you both feel about the word belief? Because I use hope a lot. I sling it around a lot because, you know, it sounds nice. It's postcard, but it's too fluffy. So,
Mhm. It does, but it is a hard word too to just, I mean, you do have to be optimistic, right? You have to be very positive in a way to believe or have the belief that
right.
things will change.
Exactly. So when I'm trying to offer encouragement to the people who desperately need it, I guess hope has been the thing I've leaned on.
Mm.
But I think, maybe it's something different. Maybe it's just to keep going, to keep trying, to keep telling our stories, to find connection where we can, to be heard.
I think that's one of the reasons why I started watching some younger adoptee TikTok
Mhm,
creators,
mhm.
because I'm so proud of them, even in the moments where lots of people are like, you sound so angry. And I'm like, yeah, they do. And your point, righteous anger, and especially coming from the Christian background that I came from, the evangelical background, I think of them and how they're reacting as we're all adopted people and we're speaking out, and now they're speaking out. It's like generational trauma is being dealt with. And if we can get to the younger and younger where they can actually speak their truth before they're 50,
Yeah,
wouldn't that be nice?
wouldn't that
Um,
be nice?
and they are. And people, they take a lot of flack. But I have this mental image of, even though I don't consider myself like a Christian per se anymore, but I have this mental image of Jesus flipping tables in the synagogue, and the status quo doesn't like it. And he's flipping tables because, yeah, I'm mad. Yeah. And, that's
Mhm.
okay. We just mentioned the myth of normal, and Gabor Mate talks about how anger is an okay emotion. Stuffing it down doesn't help. Now, okay, there's that line of always living as an angry person, but I don't think that's what this is. This is just things that shouldn't have happened the way they did, and then silencing people for other people's comfort, etc. And I think maybe the belief or the hope or whatever word you want to use, I just think feel what you're feeling. It is okay.
Mm,
It's okay. And people don't have to force you into, well, you should forgive or you should do this. You know what? You should step away from telling me what to do. How about that?
exactly.
Because these are things that we need to process. And I think that we can only see putting one foot in front of the other or carrying on all of those different things, feeling hope. We can only do that if we've allowed ourselves to feel the whole gamut of all of the emotions, and not choosing. Well, like Amy said, it's hard to spend time in self-care because we don't count, really, right? We don't count.
Mhm.
We were first relinquished, and that, even though we as adults know the circumstances under which that happened, it doesn't change the fact that an infant just thinks it's been abandoned, right?
Right.
um like my first mom told me, you were never unwanted, only unexpected. But
Mm,
an infant just knows mom's gone, right? Like, we have our thinking brains now, our ability to reason now. And
Mhm.
so we need to be able to process all of those things. And I think that's the only way we can get to some other side, a healthier side, a more positive side. Because I will fully admit, I'm not a naturally optimistic person. I'm probably more naturally nihilistic. and like, like that, ding, ding, me too.
yeah, me too.
Um, and so just cut yourself some slack and feel what you need to feel,
Mm, I love
you
that.
know?
I think that is a beautiful way to wrap this up. And this conversation I loved every second of it, and I appreciate you both wearing red and black. Nicely done, ladies. Nicely done.
Yeah.
And I just want to imagine us in Elle's beautiful fairy forest wearing red dresses with all of our feelings being felt. Wouldn't that be a magical world?
You guys should come visit.
We should come visit. We would have so much fun. The best time ever.
Yeah.
Is there anything, Elle, that we didn't talk about, or any last thoughts that you have? And same goes for you, Amy. Anything more before we wrap it up?
Go ahead.
I was going to say, I don't. I just appreciate your honesty, and I know things that you said today will help so many people going through, whether it's estrangement with their adopted family or just, dealing with all that. Those are subjects that are really hard to talk about, and to have someone who's so honest and feeling is just so important. So I appreciate that so much. Thank you for letting me be a part of it.
I'm glad you were here. It was so nice to meet you.
Well, you ladies are the best. Everyone stay strong out there. One step at a time, right? One step at a time.